had little control over their lives. It was really a rough situation there for them. The political power there in the colonized Central America and the North America, before colonization, Native and Aztec and Native leaders had the power. Then it was all the Spanish, economic. The Portuguese had that power, and that quickly turned to the Spanish. And the social power originally was with the natives, but now it was with those peninsulares, which had a lot more power there at the time. Finally, and I know this has been a little bit of a longer podcast, I do apologize greatly for that. The triangular trade and the slave trade, not very fun. Here's how it worked. The first leg, European exports exported manufactured goods to Europe and Africa. European ships carried slaves and gold to the Americas and sometimes ivory back to Europe. And finally, rum, tobacco, cotton, and molasses went from America to Europe, as well as tobacco and manufactured goods went to Africa. So really kind of tough stuff. And one of the big things there was the trade of slaves, which in majority went from Africa's west and sometimes east coast to places in South America, and mostly in the the West Indies there. And I don't really want to get into all the details of the gruesome nature of the slaves, but the point is the impact of the external slave trade on Africa was really devastating as a nation. There was no longer any of the fittest specimens, both physically and mentally, in the continent, and most likely demoralizing the country. It was really got to be pretty rough. 12 million of the strongest people taken out of Africa, slowing down its industry and economy, and placing the continent back for centuries. The images of poor Africans going for water and thatched roof huts that we see today are a large part to the devastating blow of the slave trade dealt to the continent, sucking out the slave trade did deal to the continent, sucking out all of the resources from the continent and making it easier for colonization by the Europeans. Many lives were lost in slavery, and a lot of people also lost their hope because they were living in fear of being killed and just not really being able to communicate effectively. It was act and be treated like normal people and not property. So yeah, there is that. And so we thank you so much for listening to today's show. Hope you get a great grade on your test, and thanks so much for listening to this episode of Global